Why higher interest rates are actually a good thing for the educated investor. So it's really important to understand why interest rates go up, and it is generally due to inflation, which is the increase of goods or services over a period of time. So for example, if you take a Freddo bar, which going back to 2000, so nearly 25 years ago, that same Freddo bar would have cost you 10 pence. Whereas in today's market, it's going to cost you anywhere between 25 to 30 pence, which is obviously a massive increase of 2.5 to 3 times what that product was worth over 2 decades ago. Now it may seem like a small amount, but when you actually put this into like, say for an example of a property, for example, a property you purchased 25 years ago for £100,000, that property in today's market is going to be worth anywhere between £250,000 to £300,000. So you can see how inflation increases the cost of actual goods and services over a period of time. So why have interest rates gone up so aggressively, you might ask, in the last 12 to 18 months? And the reason is because inflation was hitting an all-time high of over 10% last year. Now, as I'm sure you can appreciate from the examples I've just given you, that is completely unsustainable in our economy, and it's something the government obviously is way above what the government's target is of around 2% year on year. So how can you combat that higher rate of inflation? And the only avenue in which the government essentially has is by making lending a lot more expensive, which is why we've seen the base rate increase significantly, meaning that mortgages, for example, are obviously a lot higher than what you'd have got pre-COVID. So for example, when your interest rates were at an all-time low, a lot of people were essentially taking out mortgages to buy property. And with the shortage of housing in the UK, it essentially meant there was a lot more people competing for that same property, pushing that price up way above what the market rate should have been at that time. And now by having higher interest rates, it's deterring more and more people from potentially buying property, which means that there's less people buying, and therefore there's less competition, which means the prices of those properties are being sold around about the market value and not being essentially increased significantly from what they should have been during that time. Now, if you're finding this video interesting and you'd like to find out more about investing back into the UK property market, then consider subscribing and liking this channel in order to get some more useful tips that might help you along your own investment journey. So why are higher interest rates a good thing for the educated investor, you might ask? And that's because there are less people buying property. So for example, somebody who's currently renting a property and saving up for a deposit, who may be looking this year to buy a property, will actually be looking at the interest rates and saying, do you know what, with the rates as they are today, it's actually cheaper for me to actually continue renting a property. So what that means for us investors is there's less and less people buying property today. So that means we're able to secure discounts on this property because there's less competition. What do you think is going to happen with those people that are not actually looking to move into buying their own property? They're going to continue renting. So what that means is an even greater demand on the properties available to rent, more and more people looking to rent, which essentially is only going to push rents up. Which is why buying property in the current market essentially means that you're able to get much higher rates, which essentially offset the higher interest and lending rates that are now available to us. So not only are we able to secure discounts on property, essentially creating additional equity in a property in today's current climate, when interest rates do eventually start coming down, and as I've mentioned, the base of banking and base rates now starting to stabilise, which, you know, in the coming months we will then start to see that slowly coming down, which means that interest rates will become more and more favourable, and they'll never get back to the pre-COVID times, but they will come down to a more manageable level. So when that happens, what do you think is going to happen to rents? You know, as a landlord, are we going to go back to tenants and we're going to say to them, do you know what, my interest rate's gone down by 2%, so I'm going to offer you a reduction on your rent? No. The rents are going to become the new norm. And therefore what's going to happen is that when you may be running at around about £250 cash flow per month based on the current interest rates that you have today and the rents being paid, when these interest rates come down, your rent's going to still be at that same level. So what's going to happen to your cash flow? It's going to increase significantly and get you much closer to where we probably were pre-COVID times, if not surpassing that. So that's why, for me, it's really important to understand the impacts of how supply and demand works, and why interest rates have gone up, and why now it's considered a fantastic time for me to invest in property.